Hello, my name is Reverend Dr. May Elise Cannon. Today is Monday, May 27th. It's Memorial Day in the United States, and it's day 234 here in Israel and the occupied Palestinian territories. This was an update that I received from OCHA, the Office of the Coordination of Humanitarian Affairs at the United Nations. I received this a few days ago on the 24th of May. It says there has been nothing limited about the suffering and misery that Israel's military operation in Rafah has brought to the people of Gaza. And this, by the way, this is my commentary, was before the most recent attacks that killed more than 40 people in Rafah. So the OCHA note continued, it said, as feared, it has been a tragedy beyond words. The ground incursion in Rafah has displaced more than 800,000 people, fleeing once again in fear for their lives and arriving in areas without adequate shelter, latrines, and clean water. It has cut off the flow of aid into southern Gaza and crippled a humanitarian operation already stretched beyond its breaking point. It has halted food distributions in the south and slowed the supply of fuel for Gaza's lifelines, bakeries, hospitals, and water wells to a mere trickle. Though Israel dismissed the international community's appeals to spare Rafah, the global clamor for an immediate stop to this offensive has grown too loud to ignore. With today's adoption of Security Council Resolution 2730, calling for the protection of humanitarian workers, and the International Court of Justice's order to open the Rafah crossing to provide aid at a scale and stop the military's offensive there, this is a moment of clarity. It is a moment to demand respect for the rules of war, for which all are bound. Civilians must be allowed to seek safety. Humanitarian relief must be facilitated without obstruction. Aid workers and the UN staff must be able to carry out their jobs in safety. At a time when the people of Gaza are staring down famine, when hospitals are attacked and invaded, when aid workers are blocked from reaching people in need, when civilians are under bombardment from north to south, it is more critical than ever to heed the calls made over the last 7 months. Release the hostages. Agree to a ceasefire. End this nightmare. It has been a nightmare. There's been a deadly attack in Rafah the past couple of days. And not only that, Israel is on fire, literally, in the north. A fire started in north of Israel after attacks by Hezbollah. I'm at the Tel Aviv airport. I'm set to fly home in just a couple of hours. And I wanted to give an update on what's happened on day 234. The death toll in Gaza, according to the health ministry there, is 36,050 people. Those wounded is 81,026 since October 7th. The death toll after the Israeli strike in the Rafah tent camp has climbed to 45 people, with initial findings of an Israeli investigation into the incident saying that there was an airstrike against Hamas commanders that set off a fire which killed Palestinian civilians. Israel's government spokesperson announced that today, which is Monday. Israel Army said that they have taken steps to minimize the possibility of civilian harm ahead of the deadly Rafah strike. They said before the attacks, many steps were taken to reduce the harm of uninvolved people, including a visual aerial inspection, the use of precision weaponry, and the use of additional intelligence information, on the basis of which it was estimated that harm to uninvolved civilians was not expected. But Netanyahu also called the deadly Rafah strike a tragic error. And he said that during a speech he gave to hostages' families in a protest against him at the Knesset. Several Arab countries, including Egypt, Qatar, Jordan, and Kuwait, condemned the strike in Rafah along with Egypt, and they called it a deliberate bombing of displaced people's tents. Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas, his office called for immediate international intervention. Purchase for Middle East Peace, we joined international NGOs in a joint statement that came out today. You'll be able to find that statement on the Norwegian Refugee Council's website. It's up right now, but that will be on our website on Tuesday or thereafter. You'll also be able to find it on social media, calling for the enforcement of the ICJ's orders for Israel to halt their actions against Rafah. France's President Macron condemned the attack in Rafah and called for an immediate ceasefire. And Italy's defense minister said that the violence against civilians was no longer justifiable. UNRWA called the reports horrifying. The IDF, Shin Bet, and the military border police arrested 6 Palestinians suspected of being involved in terrorism overnight into today. And according to the army, 2 of the suspects are affiliated with Hamas. And additionally, Israeli forces seized vehicles carrying cargo, confiscated weapons, and other means of warfare in the Jenin area. Again, that's in the northern part of the West Bank. The Israeli Air Force attacked a Hezbollah operative in the area where launches were carried out towards Kibbutz Malkiah. That's in North Israel. That happened this morning. And the army reported that a Hezbollah military structure in the area of Atarun in southern Lebanon was also attacked. And last week's World Court ruled their ruling on Gaza must be applied according to EU countries. They are going to discuss what it means to take action in terms of implementing that ruling, according to the High Representative of the EU for Foreign Affairs and the Security Policy. That's according to Joseph Borrell. Several dozen of activists from the Brothers and Sisters in Arms movement, they're protesting near the home of the transportation minister, Regev, here in Israel, against a law to continue the exemption from conscription related to the ultra-Orthodox movement. That law is expected to be approved today. I don't know whether or not that happened. And the army here in Israel reported that the Air Force attacked 2 squads of Hezbollah operatives in the organization's military buildings in South Lebanon. Hamas fired a barrage of 8 rockets at Tel Aviv and central Israel for the first time since January in the last 24 hours. I reported on that last night. You'll recall I was on the border with Gaza. The Israeli Defense Forces said the volley was launched from Rafah in response to Israeli Defense Forces activities against a large rocket production site in the area. Most of those rockets were intercepted. There was rocket shrapnel that fell through the roof of a home in Herzliya. Herzliya is just north of Tel Aviv. And military police questioned a reservist suspected of being the masked speaker in a video that went viral that was calling for mass insubordination in the Israeli Defense Forces if control of Gaza was handed to Hamas or the Palestinian Authority. The video was publicized by Netanyahu's media loyalist and the prime minister's son. The IDF later announced the man will no longer serve as a reservist in the military. In response to the video, Defense Minister Gallant said the IDF has one authority, and that's the authority of its commander. The War Cabinet submitted a proposal to establish a commission of inquiry about October 7th into the Gaza war, and thousands attended the funerals of 2 of the bodies that were returned to Israel last week after being taken hostage on October 7th and murdered. About 200 aid trucks that included 4 fuel trucks were expected to enter Gaza through the Kerem Shalom yesterday, according to reports. And Senator Chris Murphy, who's the chair of the Senate's Mideast subcommittee, told CBS that the Gaza humanitarian crisis could be a boon to terrorism groups all around the world. He said, our own intelligence experts have told us that this is having a generational impact on terrorism. And I'll just say, we've been saying that to the State Department since the beginning, that this is not in the best interest of Israel, of the United States, or of anyone. So if you cannot stop the bombing of Gaza, if you cannot stop the humanitarian crisis for the sake of Palestinians, do it for pragmatic reasons. So it sounds like Senator Chris Murphy agrees with us. The EU Foreign Policy Chief Joseph Borrell met with Mohammed Mustafa, that's the Prime Minister of the Palestinian Authority, to call for an immediate end to hostilities. And then the Israeli Defense Forces detected 15 rocket launches from Lebanon towards northern Israel yesterday, and 40 more rockets were launched later last night. There were no casualties, but a fire has started. There was an Israeli man who was slightly injured. And of course, the Israeli Defense Forces counter-struck Hezbollah targets in South Lebanon. So that hostilities have increased on the northern border. The IDF reported that 20 to 30 rockets were fired towards North Israel just even within the last hour since I've been here at the airport. I'll talk a little bit more about that fire. It sounds like it has not yet been contained. Israelis are also paying close attention to the recent Palestinian initiative to suspend Israel from the International Federation of the Association of Football, because that's so significant in Jewish Israeli society. And it sounds like Israeli-Palestinian negotiations with Hamas, between Hamas and Israel, are on hold because of the deadly attack on Rafah. Those were supposed to start back up, but Hamas, or a Hamas official, has said that they're now on hold. A top military lawyer is investigating 70 or about that number of possible legal violations during the Gaza war. That was announced at the Israel Bar Association conference in Eilat. The attorneys said, we take these allegations very seriously and we're working to clarify them. They mentioned the recent IDF strike on Rafah, but just in the past 2 hours, this relates to the northern border of Israel. A fire broke out in the open area in Israel's north because of that rocket fire from Lebanon. So firefighting forces are struggling to contain that fire in northern Israel after rockets struck that open area. And that fire is not yet reported to be under control. And finally, I spent some time today in what's known as Hostage Square in Tel Aviv. And I was humbled by the way that so many diverse Israelis from different walks of life, some from kibbutzes, some are kibbutzim from different ages, communities, different areas of the country, are all committed to coming together. They've committed to setting politics aside. Their main goal is to bring hostages home. And I think it's important that we seek to understand the things that they have to say and understanding their stories. One of the women we spoke with is a representative for one of the hostages' families, and she said it's a core human value that we protect human life. And we agree with her. And we've been calling for the hostages to be returned home. And I let the people we met with there know that. And I told them that we're committed to calling for the hostages to be returned home. And I also talked to them, you know, about the people we know and love in Gaza and the protection of their human life as well. This woman we talked with talked about the heinous acts committed on October 7th, but even in the midst of her clear disdain for what happened that day, she also talked about civilians in Gaza and how they are not the same as Hamas. And this particular woman, she spends a lot of time at Hostage Square in the day, and then at night she goes out to protest for an end to the war. And she was excited when she learned that we're peace activists, and she wanted to be sure to tell us that, which I thought was really beautiful. So after spending a couple of days in Israel, we've heard lots of thoughts and opinions. Many people disagree with us, but there's many people here who are also calling for peace and calling for a ceasefire. And we want to stand alongside of them. And so we are committed to calling for an end to the war on Gaza and committed to calling for immediate and adequate humanitarian assistance and the release of hostages and a release to Palestinian prisoners who are being held unjustly and mistreated in prison. And we're committed to calling for an end to occupation. And, you know, we're calling on the US government to withhold weapons. There's a lot of work to still be done. So do not be discouraged. We'll continue in our efforts. We call for justice and liberation for Palestinians. And until we're all free, none of us are free.